Let's look at our next category of attacks, and these are even more dangerous. Chopping. What are we talking about with chopping? Again, we're talking about a two-handed swing, but with something even heavier and often held overhead. That would be something like an axe or spades, because they have a sharp edge as well. Statistically, these are less common, but they're even more dangerous and they're even more difficult to defend. That's why we need to look at this specifically, because now you have the added weight, the added length, and often there's an extrusion, a head coming out, which makes it even more dangerous to deal with. Let's look at some of the defenses. All right, let's look now at the chopper, the overhead attack. Once again, in schools that do impact weapon defenses, they do a lot of overhead attacks. Statistically, overhead attacks are relatively common, an actual direct overhead. The most common human angle that we talked about is more of a downward 45 or a cross 45, like we did with the two-handed and one-handed swings. However, the one time that there are downward strokes, and they're quite dangerous, is when we're using even heavier two-handed implements, such as an axe, spade, which has an edge on it similar to an axe, and other kinds of heavy implements that may have an extrusion, a head on the end. So this isn't exactly an axe, but it's very similar. Now the problem with this is not only you've got the added weight and a two-handed swing, but you've got now a 90-degree extrusion on the end. So it's more difficult to defend if something like this was traditionally done. Not that this would be very effective to begin with, but you can see the added problem. You've now got a 90-degree attack thing here. Very much like the battle axes of old that were used in the Middle Ages. All right, let's look at the principle here. As he winds up overhead, most of the danger is between his arms. So in this case, there's no point trying to go between his arms. It's a lot safer to go on the outside. So as he begins to swing, my arms are going to come up, and I'm going to use a similar kind of entry. The difference is, swing, I'm stepping to the outside. The stepping is fairly basic idea. It's skill in itself, but it's not a hard one to acquire. The idea is I just have to step off try to step off at 45. There's two things happening here at the same time. The first one is, as I step off, it also carries my head. So even if I'm late, my head stays over my lead knee, and I'm getting a nice 45-degree angle here. Now, more importantly is the sliding block. As it comes down, I want to keep my arm rigid against the side of my head, and the second one can act as a support hand. Now, if you do this slowly or quickly, it looks like I'm pushing it away. I'm not. If I try to time this, there's a chance that I'm going to open up a gap between my head and my arm, and that could be the gap that's going to open up and get my head split, part my hair. So as he winds up and swings, I just keep this arm in place, and if I'm late and I make contact with his arms or with the weapon itself, it's going to slide right down my arms instead of making contact at a right angle. That's why something like this is really dangerous. Even if this head wasn't here, this kind of 90-degree impact is going to shatter this arm. But a sliding block like this lets the force dissipate. So I have two lines of defense here. As he winds up, I step out and I let the sliding blocks do my work. This one stays in place, but this one might be able to push a little bit if I'm late, since it's the support hand. Now as we